And welcome back to the Standard Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Jono, and today we have a loaded episode talking about the free agency frenzy that began at 12 p.m. Monday, March 11th. Let's unpack this. So there were a plethora of moves made on Monday at the strike of noon. We had quarterbacks going to new teams. We had quarterbacks going to back up in new teams. Running backs finding new homes, some with rivals, some another division, some another conference. We had wide receivers requesting trades, wide receivers getting traded. So let's start off with the quarterbacks. I think this is the one area that there was a big name that we had talked in our previous episodes that finally had some answers to our fantasy football predictions moving forward, and that's Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins goes and signs a 4-year, $180 million deal, $100 million guaranteed with the Atlanta Falcons. Now, this is an interesting move. I think it puts himself in a position, it puts Atlanta in a position also to win the division, get themselves into the playoffs, which they were barely out of last year. I think the quarterback play should help out. You have Bijan Robinson, which is a fantastic dump-off option, and also for them to actually build into the screen game for Kirk Cousins. Takes a little pressure off of him there. Plus the running game, I think, will look good with Bijan overall. You have a number one wide receiver in Drake London that just hasn't had the quarterback love that he's needed to just showcase his talents that he had coming out of college. And you have Kyle Pitts, a first-round draft pick by the Atlanta Falcons years ago, is now with a quarterback that hopefully can use his assets. I think this is like put up or shut up time for Pitts and the Falcons. If I'm the Falcons, I'm trading Pitts if this is not what it's supposed to be. I think Kirk Cousins is going to bring what they need to hear. I'm not concerned at all about his Achilles. Yeah, Achilles tears aren't something you like to see. I mean, let's be honest, though. Dan Marino had Achilles tear. Plenty of running backs have come back from Achilles tears. He's not a quarterback that's going to be scrambling. He's a pocket passer and kind of a little freak thing. It's weird that it happened to him, and it's weird that it also happened to Aaron Rodgers, both in the same season. Actually, a lot of Achilles tears this past season. But I'm not worried about it with Kirk Cousins. Look for Atlanta to also add some more weaponry in the passing game in this draft. I suspect now that the 8th spot, without needing a quarterback, they're most likely going to go with the top edge rusher on that D line to bolster that a little bit better. But you never know who falls down in that wide receiver group. If all of a sudden Rome Odunze or Malik Neighbors or somebody falls down and they're sitting there at the 8th spot, it's going to be a tough pill to swallow not wanting to take one of those guys to add more weaponry to the Atlanta Falcons offense. I like Kirk Cousins here. I think he has the opportunity, not as much to be a top 10 quarterback. I still think he's a top 12 quarterback overall, but to put him in the top 10 without Justin Jefferson, and we saw Jordan Addison, and that high-flying passing offense where they couldn't run the ball well in Minnesota, I think they're going to have a better time running the ball here. I still think he can throw for 4,000 yards. Just not sure how many touchdowns he's going to be. You know, when he left the league with the injury this past season, he was leading the NFL in touchdowns. So that's something to see. I hope they add some more firepower. I mean, hey, Brock Bowers, you had a second tight end there with Pitts, and all of a sudden you got yourself a 2 tight end sets for blocking and for receiving. That's another option that they could go with there too. But I think they lean towards the offensive line or the pass rush here, especially if you want to protect Cousins or you want to attack the opposing quarterbacks. Another guy that Kirk Cousins is going to be battling for the top team in that division is Baker Mayfield. He is re-signing with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for a 3-year deal up to $115 million. I think Tampa Bay is finally comfortable with a quarterback outside of Tom Brady in the most recent history. Obviously, Jameis Winston's the one who had a 10-year a little bit longer there before he was shipped off. I think with Baker Mayfield there, they give him stability. He's a playmaker. He's a winner. He's a grinder is the best word for it. He's going to tough out injuries, and he's going to put his team in the best position to win. Yes, he makes mistakes, but don't all quarterbacks at some point? I think he's gotten a bad rap because of where he started his career off with. So I like Baker Mayfield. He's a top 15 guy. He was a fantastic streamer last year, certain weeks for you. And with Mike Evans coming back, which we'll talk about in the wide receiver section, I think it gives him a great opportunity again to increase those touchdown passes. We'll see what else they do on the offensive side of the ball to help him out too this year. The big interesting move here that I kind of thought and predicted where this guy was going to go, but it's just so weird to see how this entire thing played out and unfolded with Russ Wilson. I mean, what a ride Denver Broncos it was. And Chris did a nice short on it. If you haven't seen it, go check that out on our channel. But it was a disaster for Russ Wilson in Denver. I think him in Pittsburgh puts him in a good situation, and it puts Pittsburgh in a really good situation because it showed last year that they were really a quarterback away from winning some of these games. They had the running game that kept them in it. You had a dysfunctional passing game no matter who was at the helm. And yeah, there were some heroics here and there by Trubisky, or there were heroics by Mason Rudolph. But at the end of the day, no consistency for those wide receivers, no consistency for those running backs, and no consistency on that offense. I think moving forward, you got Russell Wilson, who played decent football at times for the Broncos last year. They just couldn't get the ball into the end zone. He had some big comeback wins, and we know he's a smart quarterback. He can extend plays and make things happen. I like this. Chris likes it for George Pickens. I like it for Deontay Johnson. I think if they don't deal Deontay Johnson and they bring him back, I think the biggest thing here is he was the one who was open more times than not. He's going to kind of be a safety relief valve for Russell Wilson, but I do think he's going to try and get the ball in George Pickens' hands. Why not get it to your best playmaker in terms of acrobatics and athletics? And he's a dynamic wide receiver that makes plays. Russ is going to take some more chances. He's got the arm still kind of to do that. And again, by extending plays, gives them opportunities. I like this for Pittsburgh. I know they say he's going to battle with Kenny Pickett for the starting role. I find it hard that you're going to sign. Well, it was a really cheap one-year deal because Broncos are paying pretty much everything. But that being said, I find it hard that you're going to bring Russ here without promising him that he's going to have an opportunity to, one, do the starting role, but maybe also, help mold Kenny Pickett in a way that would make him a better future prospect for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Let's talk about a quarterback that's got traded to a team not to start, unfortunately, but to back up, and that's Mac Jones. He gets himself out of the grip of the terrible New England Patriots that he was slowly seeing his career die at. I think for Mac Jones, this is kind of a resurgence for him. It gives him an opportunity to be in a young organization with young players and challenging him a little bit more. And at the end of the day, they really needed somebody to back there behind Trevor Lawrence that has actually been able to do something. Mac Jones was a Pro Bowler. Let's not forget he threw over 20 touchdown passes his rookie year. He's not a slouch. I mean, yeah, at times he did not look great last year, but even when Zappy went in, there were times where he didn't look great. I think New England was just in a sinking ship, and Mac Jones was the one that was caught sinking it himself in terms of the scapegoat and blame game for New England. So I kind of like this for Mac Jones. I don't think it's a huge upgrade for him. Obviously, you don't want to go from being a starter to a backup, but sometimes in this league, you don't have an opportunity, and you're going to take the best chance you have. It was out of his hands. It was a trade, but I think he's got to like to where he went. And again, he may have an opportunity to be shipped around to some other team and finally get himself another starting role somewhere else. More to come on that. Gardner Minshew, the guy who, Uncle Rico had a great fill in for Anthony Richardson after the injury. I think Gardner Minshew is somebody that in his new role where he has been signed by Las Vegas, where he's going to be battling for the starting role with Aiden O'Connell. I like Gardner Minshew outright winning this job. He proved it with Indianapolis with a team of scrappy guys and Michael Pittman, but now he's got Devontae Adams. Yeah, there's no more Josh Jacobs there. We'll talk about that shortly. Not to give, most of you guys heard the news, so nothing here is a spoiler. But in terms of Gardner Minshew not having all the pieces there at the Raiders, I still think he's got an opportunity with the pieces he does have to be successful in Vegas. I think he's going to take over that starting role, and you'll see them really be able to move the ball down the field a little bit more. He reminds me a lot of Baker Mayfield. These guys are just gamers. They are grinders, and they get in there, and they want to try and win and do everything possible to help their team win. And that's what you want at your leadership. Another guy who has been thrown into a possible starting role and right now is the starter is Sam Darnold, a guy who was brought in his career with the New York Jets as the starter and slowly found himself being put behind as the backup, going to another team, not starting for a little bit, then becoming a backup and finding himself being the backup in San Francisco. He has now landed with the Minnesota Vikings after the departure of Kirk Cousins. If they don't go for anybody in the draft, Sam Darnold is their short-term go-between before they have their future quarterback. I like Sam Darnold. I actually think he's a good quarterback. I think, again, you can't judge a quarterback by his tenure with the Jets. Let's be honest here. Zach Wilson had a cannon coming out of college, had opportunities, didn't look so good there. Joe Flacco came in, and look what Joe Flacco did this past season for the Browns. He couldn't do that with the Jets. So I don't want to knock on Darnold too much. And then he went to Carolina. But that being said, Sam Darnold to the Vikings makes it interesting. I mean, we're going to talk about Justin Jefferson here for a moment. You have Justin Jefferson looking for a long-term contract, wanting to be the highest paid wide receiver in the NFL. If you think that's really going to happen with Sam Darnold as his quarterback, and he's going to be like, yeah, man, Sam Darnold's the answer for me. I can't wait. This is going to be, I'm going to break some records here. I'm going to be worth every penny here. I don't know. I've been saying this for the past couple of weeks, that honestly the past couple of months, but if Kirk Cousins did not re-sign with the Vikings, I think they should trade Justin Jefferson. Trade him to a team inside the top 10 that is looking to get a receiver, get the pick from them, get the future receiver, and get some other picks either in this 2024 draft or the 2025 draft. I mean, in my opinion, I think you could argue Justin Jefferson is worth a first-round pick and a possible first round next year, definitely second round next year. I mean, the guy's going to be worth every single penny that you pay for. He's going to want to catch the ball from a premier quarterback. Now, you look at the teams in the top 10 that have premier quarterbacks, and you really don't have much. But the Arizona Cardinals are there. They have their quote-unquote franchise quarterback in Kyler Murray. That's an option. Again, you get that. Now they get Marvin Harrison Jr. out there with Jordan Addison, behind Sam Darnold for a year, and then they get a quarterback in the future. That's an option. The other one too is you stretch it down to the top 15. You get yourself into another situation there. To me, at the end of the day, that is the way if the Vikings really want to start not a true rebuild, because they spent big on defense here. And we're not going to get into the defensive moves they made and other teams made because we're talking about fantasy value here. But the defensive moves the Vikings made were fantastic. That helps them win those games that they were losing by a little bit last year and keeps them in it on an already decent defense from last year. So that being said, if Sam Darnold's your guy, I find it very hard for Justin Jefferson to want to get a big-time extension with this team versus going somewhere else. I mean, here's the thing, and this is hypothetical, and I haven't heard this anywhere else here, but maybe you're hearing it the first time here. Justin Jefferson and some picks to the Cincinnati Bengals for T. Higgins. And then, again, swap some picks between the two. I haven't hashed out what those should be, but that's a fantastic move for both teams. T. Higgins gets pretty much a wide receiver one role here right next to Jordan Addison. Justin Jefferson teams up with Jamar Chase, his old teammate, on top of dealing with Joe Burrow. The only thing that would stop that from happening is the fact that they've got to pay Jamar Chase. Then you got to pay Justin Jefferson. So the added benefit of getting rid of some of the cap space there and getting some running backs on the cheap, which we'll get into here, and already having Joe Burrow contract done, maybe there's a possibility. Maybe you do Chase now and then you do Jefferson next year. I don't know, but I'm just saying there's a realm of possibility that something like that can happen. That's what I would do if I am the Minnesota Vikings, but I'm not. So we'll see what happens over the next couple months, and we'll see what they end up doing at the end of April in the NFL draft. Let's talk about the last couple quarterbacks here. And again, if I don't mention anybody here, one, either it hasn't been done yet as of the recording, or two, based on when I was taking all my notes down, getting ready for this episode, it wasn't a deal that was done yet. And Chris will highlight that in our next episode. But Tyrod Taylor, backup quarterback for the New York Giants, is staying in New York, but wearing the green and black instead of the blue and red. So that's a nice little piece for him to go back up in the New York Jets and go back up Aaron Rodgers. I think he's a formidable option for them, and that was what hurt them last year, is not really having a true option as a number 2 behind Aaron Rodgers, and it kind of hurt them and pretty much kept them out of the playoffs because of that. Another backup moving to another place, especially New York, is Drew Lock. He is signing a deal with the New York Giants of 1 year, so he will be backing up Daniel Jones as of now until we'll see what the Giants do in the draft. They're another team that has the opportunity to go take a quarterback. They have the 6th pick. They're up there. They can make a move for the 4 pick with the Cardinals, and you never know. They can decide to go the route of Justin Fields. They can decide and make the trade with Chicago. They can go up and trade picks with the New England Patriots if they want. If the Patriots are looking to get a receiver and not necessarily want to be at that 3 spot and get some more capital. The hard part is we just traded for Brian Burns from Carolina. Great pass rusher. I'm excited to have him on the Giants. But we gave up our first of our 2 second-round picks. That is premium draft capital when you're talking about trading up in picks. But we'll see. You never know. They are in line to possibly still get J.J. McCarthy at the 6th spot if they really like him. Now, before I move on from the Giants, don't forget who the 6th pick for the New York Giants was in the last draft that they got a quarterback. It was Daniel Jones. And it was not who a lot of Giants fans expected at the 6th pick coming out of Duke. It was a reach, and I think the Giants know it now. Would J.J. McCarthy or Michael Penix be a reach at the 6th spot? Some argue that J.J. McCarthy is the 3rd best quarterback off the board. Some argue Michael Penix is a top 3 quarterback off the board. If that's the case, and the Giants think so too, then I don't think it's a reach. It's not like Daniel Jones, who would have been a day 2 quarterback, in my opinion, that year. I digress. Last quarterback we'll talk about here is Jacoby Brissett's going back to the New England Patriots. We have no idea what they're going to do there. Are they going to run with Brissett as a starter, or does this just show that, hey, we got rid of Mac Jones, we bring Brissett in as a backup, and then all of a sudden they go ahead and get that 3rd quarterback off the board in terms of Chicago, Washington, and then them if it sticks to that schedule of picks. So that's it for the quarterbacks. Again, if I missed anything, Chris will bring it up next episode. Leave a comment on what your thoughts are and what your favorite moves are and your least favorite moves are there. I love Kirk Cousins to Atlanta. I was excited to see that. Not as much as I wanted him to return to Minnesota, to be honest. I think it was fun watching that team with him at Minnesota. But I love it for Baker Mayfield, and I love it for Gardner Minshew. Really interested to see how Russ Wilson does. I actually think you're going to see a bounce back. And like Chris said in his short about Russ, I don't think it's going to be a complete turnaround to see how he was young at the Seattle's offense. But I think you will see an improvement in his game. Before we move on to the running backs, don't forget to like and subscribe. Hit that notification button so you get all the episode drops that we're doing, including the plethora of shorts that we throw out for up-to-date, quick shooters when we talk about news, notes, and anything in regards to NFL and fantasy football. So let's jump into the running backs, and we'll talk about the elephant in the room. I mean, we've got Giants. The former Giant, Saquon Barkley, decided to go on to the dark side, and he is a Philadelphia Eagle signing a 3-year, $37.75 million deal that has incentives to go up to roughly $47 million. He got his bag. What can I say? I can't fault the man for wanting to get paid. It does frustrate me because the Giants were trying to pay him fairly before they tagged him. He turned down the $13 million a year with $14 million a year with incentives because he wanted 16 a year. He's not getting 16 a year here. So it's frustrating to see him leave. But if it were any other team, well, maybe not the Cowboys, but any other team besides the Cowboys and the Eagles, I honestly would be happy for the guy because I'm a big fan. I'm glad we drafted him. I don't think it's a regret drafting him as a fan. I don't think the Giants regret drafting him either. But man, oh man, and I said it in a short, and I'm going to say it again right here. I personally think the term that they use, once a Giant, always a Giant, is very difficult for me to repeat with using Saquon's name. Just because you went over to the Philadelphia Eagles, man. It's like, I'm a Yankee fan. You go to the Boston Red Sox. I mean, imagine Jeter going to the Red Sox. I don't know. I would not feel the same way I felt about Jeter finishing his career at the Yankees. I would have felt much better if Jeter went somewhere else. I wouldn't even care if he went to the Orioles or anything like that. Again, Saquon went to Houston Texans, which were trying to get him as well. I wouldn't have been upset about that. Washington, I think, maybe wanted him too. I wouldn't have been upset about Washington because I would have felt bad for him, which I do for Austin Ekeler, who we're going to talk about. But it was tough to see him go there. That being said, fantasy implication. He is going to be a stud. I mean, we know he's a great running back. We know he's got talent. He's got the home run hitting ability. He's got electric opportunity. I mean, coming off of the big ACL tears and everything like that, yeah, he's had some bad injuries and some little freak injuries, but the dude ran for 1,300 yards, came back. I think he missed a couple games last year, still ran for under 1,000 yards. Touchdowns hasn't been a big thing for him, but again, it was the New York Giants. I think look what DeAndre Swift at the beginning of last season did. I mean, he was on fire. Multiple 100-yard games, scoring touchdowns left and right. The Eagles made the mistake of changing up their game plan. I think now that you have Saquon Barkley and you're paying him as much as he did, I think they overpaid, but they're paying him as much as they are. I mean, they're going to have to use him. They're going to get every ounce out of him. And if they don't, it's a huge mistake by Nick Sirianni and squad not to shoulder the load on him because things fell through the floor for the Eagles last year. Yes, you lose Jason Kelce to retirement, but you still have a great offensive line, and he is a type of running back that has good vision. With the Giants, he was being hit in the backfield, and he was still making plays. When he's not being hit in the backfield like he won't be with the Philadelphia Eagles, he's going to hit the hole. He's going to make the jump cuts. He's going to cut it to the outside when he needs to, and I think it's going to be very difficult for teams to be able to stop him when he gets into open space like that. So, I mean, listen, I'd like to truly say I'm happy for him. I can't, but I wish him luck in Philly. I still think Saquon Barkley going into this fantasy football season is a top 3 running back option this season. You're going to find it hard to argue somebody who's going to have a better opportunity besides, obviously, Christian McCaffrey up at the top there. So moving on, let's talk about the guy who departed the Philadelphia Eagles and DeAndre Swift. And I'm happy to see where he went. Chicago Bear, 3-year, $24 million deal. I think it fills the role where Chicago probably shouldn't have let David Montgomery go if we saw what David Montgomery did with the Lions last year. But that being said, you get DeAndre Swift for 3 years, who is a more dynamic runner because he's got the option of receiving out the backfield, which he was fantastic doing at Georgia. He was fantastic for the Lions, and the Eagles didn't really use it that often. That was my concern with Barkley, I think, a little bit in Philly is, are they going to use his pass-catching ability to their strength, or are they going to stick with the downfield passing, the scrambling of Jalen Hurts, and then just use him as a more traditional runner? I would think that's a mistake for Saquon. I think it's the same thing for DeAndre Swift if they don't do that there. Now, Roschon Johnson's backing him up. I like that as a nice backup. But DeAndre Swift giving them more of a dynamic runner out that backfield with speed and pass-catching ability helps that offense. Who's going to throw him the ball? Who's handing him off the ball? That's the big question. I'd like to say right now I would want it to be Justin Fields. I think Justin Fields is not as bad as people think it is, and I think people are blowing up Caleb Williams like he is the next Joe Montana, the next Pat Mahomes. And let's be honest, I think we are in a day and age where these quarterbacks are getting put up on a pedestal because it's a pass-heavy league, and you got to get them young and try and lock them down as a franchise quarterback. But the analysts out there are just blowing so much smoke because they're just so hungry to be the next guy on this big talent train. So we'll see what the Chicago Bears do with their first pick and if they decide to keep Justin Fields. But DeAndre Swift is a solid piece that was added to this offense that's going to take the pressure off that quarterback and having to make all these plays and give them a lot more third and short options. Let's talk about Josh Jacobs. This guy, before we depart from DeAndre Swift, in terms of fantasy value for DeAndre Swift, I think it bumps him up probably keeps him around the same where he was with the Eagles, because don't forget, I thought the Eagles were going to have more push, lose touchdowns to Jalen Hurts, as well as Kenneth Gainwell and those guys getting in, and that's exactly what happened. I think DeAndre Swift has an opportunity to be more the majority and lion's share here, and if you don't get Justin Fields back, you may not get that rush ability, but I also think even with Caleb Williams or Justin Fields or whoever they go with, they're not a tush-push team. I think they're going to hand the rock to him when they're inside that 15, 10-yard line, 5-yard line. I think you're going to see his touchdowns go up this season too as well. And just pass-catching ability out there is going to help him a lot too. I like him to be probably a third-round pick, maybe early fourth-round pick running back here. And I'm talking about standard fantasy leagues, but he has some good PPR value with his pass catching. So Josh Jacobs here, another guy that's a 3-down back, has departed the Las Vegas Raiders and signed a 4-year, $48 million deal with the Packers. I was not seeing this one coming at all. And if anybody out there saw this coming besides, Rappaport and any of these guys who have their ear to the ground constantly and have contacts, I did not see this coming. I thought, A.J. Dillon was going to be a free agent. Aaron Jones was still there. He already restructured his contract. I thought they would not be focusing on the running back position and maybe focus on the draft or pick up somebody, like a Devin Singletary or a Zack Moss or any one of these guys too to back up Jones. Instead, they go with their next big running back for the next 4 years, and that's Josh Jacobs. And I love it for the Packers, to be honest with you. I like Aaron Jones. I hate to see him go from the pack, but he landed on his feet. We'll talk about that in a minute. But Jacobs is 100% going to be their workhorse. Instead of having that 1-2 punch of Dillon and Jones, it's going to be a 1 punch with Josh Jacobs. He's got pass-catching ability. He's great between the tackles. He can bounce it outside. 2 years ago, he led the league in rushing. I think it was a tough season last year for all of the Raiders. So I think he has a new, fresh start somewhere in a team that actually wants him, and he got paid well. I'm like, 4-year, $48 million deal. It's fantastic. Yeah, it's less per year than Saquon, but he doesn't have to get the incentives that Saquon to get up to the $47 million needs, and he's got a longer-term contract. So I like Josh Jacobs. That he bumps me up into the same position he was this past year, early second round, late first round for sure. I even think you could argue mid-first round because I still think he's young enough and he's a good enough runner that he's going to get all that volume that you want there in a good young offense that proved that they can score points through the air. And now they got the ground game they need. We'll talk about Aaron Jones too, the guy who departed the Green Bay Packers. Aaron Jones lands a 1-year deal with the Minnesota Vikings, and I couldn't even be happier for him. I wish it was a longer deal. I know Chris and I were talking. He was really wanting him to go to the Texans instead of the Vikings, but I still think staying inside the division, you get to play your old team twice, get a little revenge game twice here and there. He's still got the wheels on him. He was off injured this past season, but if he can hold it together, and you still have Jefferson there, and you give yourself some other opportunities. Hawkinson, you have players and pieces around him that he doesn't have to be the all-star on his team, and he doesn't have to be the veteran all-star on his team. He can be the running back that he is, and he's good at his game, and that'll help out this offense because they just struggled to run the ball last year. Obviously, Alexander Mattison was not the fix for losing Dalvin Cook. In fact, they probably would have been better keeping Cook for one more year. So I like Aaron Jones. I'm not going to be jumping off the board early in my fantasy drafts to get him. And let me preface all this stuff about where I think these guys should go in the rounds by saying there's a lot more uncertainties right now that we are going to fine-tune and find out as the NFL draft happens, as we get closer to the season. And what Chris and I did last year, we're going to do this year. Feel free to go back and check out our videos before the fantasy football draft season began. But we broke down all the divisions and the teams and the players for each team once things were solidified. And it gave everybody a good, clear picture of where we thought each player would be and where they go. And Joe Mixon, to me, is one of those guys that I think is going to be a 4th-round running back pick, a 3rd-round running back pick here, late 3rd round, just because of the fact that if without Kirk Cousins there and driving the ball down the field, we don't know what's going to happen to Jefferson. If they were to get another quarterback there and Jefferson stays long-term, I'd bump him into a more solid 3rd-round pick there. But right now, I don't want to put all my eggs in that basket, just like I didn't want to last year. And he was, arguably a late 2nd, 3rd-round pick last year. Zack Moss, he had a fantastic time in Indianapolis when Jonathan Taylor was out. He earned himself a 2-year, $8 million deal with the Bengals. So the Bengals went the cheaper route than rather to try and restructure or change Joe Mixon's contract, because they already did that and he took less money. Joe Mixon, instead of cutting him, they traded him to the Texans. So let's talk about this move between the two teams here. Zack Moss, I think, is still a young guy who's showed some explosiveness out the backfield in Indianapolis. Not known for his pass-catching ability a ton. He's not like one of those big-time out-the-backfield pass catchers, but he can do it. He showed in Indianapolis. He showed in Buffalo that he can do it. He did have a fumbling problems in Buffalo that kind of chased himself out of there, but I thought he had a resurgence this past year. I like him here with the Bengals. With Chase Brown, Brown showed electric ability and speed, especially pass catching out the backfield. So look for that to be kind of a 1-2 punch. Because I don't think Zack Moss is going to shoulder the 3-down back load like even Joe Mixon didn't do last year. I think I'm hard-pressed to want to try and draft him any higher than the 3rd round. I'd probably say 4th round is a solid place for him. A lot of these guys here that are going to get good volume but are sharing backfields, or good volume and aren't on a run-heavy team, that's the ones you got to be concerned about, and that's where Zack Moss is. I think it's a lot. The people that are going to be around him in terms of pass catchers and tight ends, you may be better off to go that route. I think people are going to try and reach on him, but if he keeps falling, he is a sneaky sleeper pick to get good output, and we saw what he could do in Indy. Joe Mixon, on the other hand, going to the Texans, I love this for him. I just was happy to see any running back go to the Texans. I thought was going to be a positive, a plus for this game and for that team. Joe Mixon last year, I don't think the Bengals used him right at all to start the season. I thought you saw a lot of timidness with the running game. It showed in his running game. It showed in almost a lack of confidence in his running game. And yet he's not a speed demon by any means. But his ability to see the holes, read the blocking schemes in the offense, allowed him to make some big plays. It took a while for him to get in the end zone to start the season off, and once he did, it was hard to let his foot off the gas. He was finding himself shut down a couple times at the one. We saw that too, but anytime they were inside that red zone area, they were feeding him the ball as much as they could, and they benefited from it. I mean, it was huge. He helped out too when Joe Burrow left for the remainder of the season. So I think Joe Mixon finds himself with a young team. He's a veteran out there with Dalton Schultz. I think you have an opportunity to restart your career somewhere else. He has Dameon Pierce behind him. And we know Dameon Pierce was good his rookie season, and he still can be. But this not only helps Joe Mixon, this helps Dameon Pierce. If Dameon Pierce can take some notes from the Joe Mixon running game, I think it's going to allow him to be a better running back for the Texans moving forward if they decide to stick with him longer term. I like Joe Mixon. To me, he's a second-round running back because that offense there, I know they couldn't run the ball well last year, but he was, maybe I could argue he's a third-round running back depending upon the wide receivers you're taking in that second round and what quarterbacks go. But I'm taking him if he falls down to me in those rounds, because that offense scored a lot of points. Through the air, they're fantastic. They're going to need a complementary running game, and they're going to be in scoring position a lot more often, and you want those guys, and that's why I liked him on the Bengals. I took him last year as my third pick, and I was happy to do in third-round pick, and I was happy to do so because the same benefactor he was going to be in the Bengals, getting a high-flying passing offense, getting in scoring position often. He may only had to run 2, 3, 5 yards to get in the end zone, and it showed last year that he did it often a lot. So he's somebody I'm going to still keep my eye on, even though it's his 8th season here coming in the league. I think he's still got plenty in the tank to finish off a good career, hopefully with the Texans, if they extend him any longer. I'm not sure. It was a trade, so I don't know based on what was left on his contract. I didn't have a chance to take a look at that. But that being said, Texans have a good veteran running back now on their squad. Let's talk about a veteran running back that is no longer on his squad. That I have a lot of love for this guy in terms of fandom. A undrafted free agent coming onto his 30s now that really took the fantasy football by storm, but really took San Diego and then eventually LA by storm, and that's Austin Ekeler. Unfortunately, he is with the Washington Commanders, so all those Charger fans out there, it stinks to see him go. And the hardest part about seeing him go is he goes to Washington. It's going to be tough for him to take a ring home. I'd hate to say it's going to be tough for him to get a ring unless he's traded from Washington or something like that to a team that needs somebody that's in the hunt. But it's a 2-year deal worth up to roughly $11.5 million. Antonio Gibson went over to the Patriots over there, which complements Ramondre Stevenson and kind of the way that the Patriots always like to have a pass-catching back that, is a Swiss Army knife of styles. But Austin Ekeler gets the pass-catching opportunities for Washington and probably a lot between the tackles because he's been pretty good. But he is going to be sharing the backfield with Brian Robinson Jr., so he's going back to his days with Melvin Gordon. Now, that may help him. That may keep more in the tank. That may keep him explosive throughout there. But he's no longer going to be the number 2, 3, 1 running back off the board in your fantasy leagues. He is going to be knocked down to that 4th, 5th round running back options because, again, he's sharing the backfield. We don't know how that offense is going to run. It is Cliff Kingsbury. So when you think about that, it is more of a high-flying offense, passing offense, like we've seen in other teams that he has coached, both in college and the pros. So I have concerns about Ekeler. Personally, if I've got a pick to waste that round, and no pick in your fantasy draft should be to waste, but if you're sitting there and you don't like anybody else on the board, I'd take him in those rounds, but I'd probably stick to somebody else. And I hate to say that because he's my guy, but I just don't like it for him in Washington, where he's got to play the Giants twice, who just added more to their D-line, Eagles twice, who have a great D-line against the run, the Cowboys D-line against the run twice. So it's a tough one for Austin. I wish him luck. I hope he has success there. I hope he has a little bit of a resurgence and can get some incentives there that really helps it worth the move to the DMV. Tony Pollard. I talked about the Cowboys in the division here. Tony Pollard has moved on to the Tennessee Titans, a 3-year, $24 million deal. Tony Pollard is lucky he got a 3-year, $24 million deal. He was not a great running back in fantasy wise. And when you watched him on film, there were times where he wasn't a great running back at times. I said it going into last year. Chris said it going into last year. Don't take Tony Pollard in the first round. I wouldn't even take him in the second round because of the sheer fact that Tony Pollard did well because of the scheme that they were running and sharing touches with Zeke Elliott. And so it gave that 1-2 punch. It's the same argument I can make, and I'll bring up the New York Giants, but you had Super Bowl champions Ahmad Bradshaw and Jacobs at the same time. You had not quite thunder and lightning because Bradshaw was a between the tackles tough runner too, but good pass catcher. But the two of them, if you left it just for them to run the whole game themselves, I don't think would have the success that they had together as a tandem. And I think that's what happened last year. I think they expected Pollard to be more than he could be, and he's nothing better than, right now, a good shared backfield running back. So now he goes to Tennessee Titans, where he should share the running back with Tajay Spears, because I think Tajay had a great season last year with Derrick Henry and showed true potential. So maybe that is a good thing for the Titans if they decide to deploy them that way. Don't love it for the Titans. I think there were other places he could have gone that would have been a better place for him, in my opinion, to be a tandem running back somewhere. But he got lucky. He got the 3-year, $24 million deal with Tennessee. He was one of the first two off the board in terms of free agents as soon as the time frame opened up Monday at noon. So he got on it quick. He was one of the first dominoes to fall. So happy for him. I don't know if I'm going to be happy about drafting him. I don't know where to place him yet. I don't want to allude to where he should go right now. But I know that there are a lot of other running backs that I'd rather have on my squad in those first 2 rounds than going to get Tony Pollard, who's going to be probably the main back first with Tajay Spears second. I still have concerns over who's handing him off the ball in Tennessee and how they're going to move that ball down the field. Devin Singletary got a 3-year deal worth $16.5 million to the New York Giants. So they dodge having to pay the big bank to Saquon Barkley and decide to get Devin Singletary, who had a great season last year with the Texans. He really got a head of steam rolling after it was a slow start for that running game and earned himself a good deal. I mean, the hard part is Giants only have Eric Gray. They needed a running back here. They didn't want to pay big for a running back. I'm disappointed that they paid a 3-year, $16.5 million deal there. And, you could have went and got 2-year deal for Ekeler for $11.5 million, or you could have went and got, Aaron Jones for a year. But again, they're not in a position to win now, so I get why they did that. Getting Singletary here, solid running back, a veteran in per se minds, and he gets an opportunity to also be a pass catching back. And if Eric Gray pans out to be what he is, and that kind of sneaky pick that they got last year in the draft, I think they can be decent enough to help push that ball down the field. So the last running back that we're going to talk about before the King Henry himself is going to be Gus Edwards, who's vacating the Baltimore Ravens and moving over to the LA Chargers. So this news breaking is huge for Harbaugh and his team. I think Gus Edwards showed good explosiveness between the tackles, tough running back to tackle himself. And anytime they were within the 5, this guy punched in the end zone for the Ravens. I expect that to be a lot of the same here for the Chargers. I think he's going to take over where Ekeler left off. I don't think he's going to have the same tool set as Ekeler. I don't think he's going to be catching balls out the backfield just as well. So I fully expect the Chargers to I don't expect them to re-sign Kelly for anything, but I expect them to have somebody else brought in at some point or draft somebody in the draft here and maybe the second day 2 part of the draft to complement Gus Edwards. Gus Edwards himself being on the Chargers and being the lead back, I like that. I could argue he should be a late 3rd round pick here. If you're going to talk about an offense that should be able to move the ball under Harbaugh, an offense that can pass the ball well with Keenan Allen. We'll see what they do with receiver-wise. We'll see what they do with the 5th pick, if they get a receiver there too as well, or if they go with Brock Bowers. But they should have offensive firepower, which will make it so that it's not stacked boxes that he's facing. And the way that Edwards runs, he runs hard. I could see him having a successful tenure with the Chargers. But let's talk about Derrick Henry. This guy is constantly being in the top 5, top 7 running backs in your fantasy leagues, especially in standard scoring leagues. He now goes to arguably probably one of the best run blocking offenses that he's going to play for. And it's a 2-year, $16 million deal. They get the piece they need. Now, did they really need Derrick Henry to win a championship? You could argue yes, you could argue no, that the running backs they had were good enough, but we saw what happened with the running backs over the course of the past couple of years. Edwards and Dobbins and these guys getting injured. They're bringing in veterans, blah, blah, blah. Like now they got a solid guy who isn't injured that often. He's a tough runner. He's going to get the tough yards. He can catch the ball out the backfield too, and he can plunge into the end zone pretty easily. It is a threat to defenses, which makes the threat of Lamar Jackson even harder to defend against because that RPO is going to be sneaky good and the blocking schemes. I'm very excited to see what Tom Monken can do here for this offense. I'm taking Derrick Henry in the first round. He may not be a top 5 pick in terms of overall, but you can make the argument he's a top 5 running back pick for you. Definitely top 7 in my book. I know there's Jonathan Taylor still out there. You still got McCaffrey. You still got Jacobs and some of these guys. So I do like some Derrick Henry, and we'll see how Nick Chubb bounces back too off of that knee injury. But you can every year you can make an argument between 3 or 4 of these running backs in that first round, which one you'd rather take. And I think it's up to you which argument you want to lean towards. So keep an eye on to see what the Ravens, how they deploy him out there. And I think it's going to be fun to watch in the purple and black. All right. Wide receivers. Let's start off with some of the big news that came out before Monday and over the weekend, and that's Jerry Jeudy being traded to Cleveland. So that was kind of a quiet news. It didn't pop up on a lot of alerts. Not a lot of people were aware until ESPN kind of broke the news, but I like that for Jerry Jeudy. I like that for Cleveland. It allows them to get another wide receiver. I mean, you've got another outside guy now to battle with Amari Cooper, whose contracts are coming up anyway. So you got a chance to have a future receiver who, let's be honest, like Jerry Jeudy was a fantastic guy coming out of college. He should have been better with Denver. Tough quarterback play on top of having the yips at times and just not looking great. I think he gets a resurgence in his career going to Cleveland. We'll see if Deshaun Watson can handle a couple 1,000-yard receivers. You have Elijah Moore coming out of the slot there, which is also great for them. Nick Chubb coming back healthy. And David Njoku. I mean, this is a dangerous team in Cleveland. We liked him going into last season. I like him going into this season. I'm willing to take a late flyer on Jerry Jeudy, in my opinion. He's worth trying to get onto your team here, whether it be PPR or non-PPR, because he does have a skill set. He's a great route runner. He gets separation. He gets open. And again, if Cooper's taking top coverage, somebody else is going to benefit. I mean, you had some Elijah Moore games that were great last year, some Peoples-Jones games. Like, there were games where that second wide receiver benefited from not being off top coverage. And Njoku definitely benefited because of the wide receiver coverage that they were getting. So Jerry Jeudy to Cleveland. Kendrick Bourne stays with the Patriots. I'm not going to go into too much detail with Kendrick Bourne here. We don't know who's throwing him the ball quite yet. It could be Brissett, could not be. He's going to be the number one guy there, even though I did hear today, and touch on it briefly, but I know Calvin Ridley is somebody the Pats are trying to go get. He would be the number one over Bourne, but I'm not sure that's going to happen because I think Ridley wants to stay with Jacksonville. So Kendrick Bourne, he's somebody too that is very athletic, very talented. I'd like to have him on my squad because they got to throw the ball in New England, and he's going to be the guy to pass catch there. Michael Pittman signed a 3-year, $70 million deal with the Colts after being franchise tagged. So that locks him in there with Anthony Richardson. I think Pittman is going to be great, solid option there. He may not be one of the top, 6 guys in terms of yardage in the NFL, but he's going to be a top 10 guy. He's going to be the main guy catching passes there. He's a great run blocker. I like Michael Pittman. I would like to try and get him on my team this year, especially with Richardson coming back off injury. So somebody to keep an eye out for. Again, when we get closer to the season, listen to the breakdown of our Colts team and our Colts offense and where we like these guys and where we would be taking them. Mike Evans signed a 2-year deal with the Bucs, so he goes on to try another 2 consecutive more years of 1,000-yard receiving to continue breaking his own record with Baker Mayfield. I think this is huge for Mayfield. This is huge for Evans. I want Mike Evans on my team. I think he's going to be drafted higher than most people want, but there's going to be leagues out there that are going to be tentative to take the old guy because everybody's expecting somebody to fall off the shelf. I mean, we saw it with Ekeler, even though I don't think it was Ekeler's fault. I think it was a Chargers' fault there. But we've seen it with running backs. We've seen it with receivers. At some point, they fall off the shelf when age comes to a factor. I don't think that's going to be the case with Evans. I'd draft him if I'm there. Depends on what the asking price is, and depends on where you are in the draft. Darnell, let's talk about some of the moves that happened on Monday and Tuesday. Darnell Mooney, 3-year, $30 million deal with the Falcons. I like this move. It's not a blockbuster move for them to sign this guy, but it kind of hints at that they're not going to go for a pass catcher at the 8 spot. So kind of interested to see what they may want to do at that 8 spot. Is it Brock Bowers to bring a second tight end in with Pitts and maybe trade Pitts? Or decide to not sign him long-term or give him the 5th-year option? Is it to get the edge rusher that I think they need or the offensive line like I was talking about when we were talking about Kirk Cousins? I think that may be the move to do. But bringing in Darnell Mooney, a guy who had great success early in his career over in Chicago and then slowly it fizzled out because of quarterback play. And last year there were some good opportunities for Mooney and it just stunk. He got overthrown multiple times on wide open plays. So I'd like to see him over in Atlanta because they really don't have anybody else. I think they have Van Jefferson there. He's somebody who can easily come into the slot and be a good receiver for Kirk Cousins. And we know what Cousins could do. He was able to easily support Hawkinson, Jefferson, and Addison throughout the entire season. I think you could see the same with those 3 guys in Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and now Darnell Mooney. So sneaky pickup there in your fantasy drafts. You don't have to you don't have to jump up high for him. You don't have to spend a lot to try and get him in terms of what round. Gabe Davis signs a 3-year, $39 million deal with the Jags. I love this too. I still have concerns over being drafting a Jaguars pass catcher because of the amount of ball spreading that they do over there, and that's a terrible term. Amount they spread the ball around over there. Trevor Lawrence doesn't necessarily have a favorite target. He takes the open target. And you saw Calvin Ridley had some big games. You saw some good games from Christian Kirk. You saw some good games from Evan Ingram. I think the same is going to be happening here with Gabe Davis, but I like it for him here because it isn't a target funnel to one receiver, Stephon Diggs. It now is an opportunity for him to showcase his talents, get himself open, and create a connection with Trevor Lawrence. And I'm willing to take him in a decent spot too as well because I don't feel like he's going to be shadowed by anybody. The only thing that concerns me is if they bring back Calvin Ridley. And if they bring back Calvin Ridley, it's a numbers game there. Somebody's going to lose out on something. And Tyler Lockett staying with the Seahawks, restructuring his contract to stay with the Seahawks for another season. He is still going to find a way to do it. And I said it last year going to the draft. I'll say it again this year going to the draft. Don't sleep on Tyler Lockett. He is going to have opportunities. I know DK Metcalf is an alpha there. I know JSN is working his way up into working hard in there. But the way that offense is running, and I think he has great opportunities still here and there. Yes, he's not in his prime, and yes, he may not rip out 1,000 yards, but as a flex play, wide receiver 2 option, high end, low end, mid end wide receiver 2 option, he could get it done for you. That's it for receivers. Again, if there's anybody I missed, just like I talked about the running backs and quarterbacks, Chris will go over those in our next episode. For now, I'm going over everything that I had privy to me information-wise going into this recording. So the last thing I'll highlight, there's not a ton of tight end news right now. We talked about Dalton Schultz already, the deal with the Texans. So he took a gamble going to the Texans instead of signing a 3-year deal elsewhere. It paid off because he got his deal with the Texans. He's on a young offense with a great coach. I think it couldn't be better, and I like him in fantasy. He's that middle of the pack, solid, steady Eddie tight end that you can get later in the draft and not have to pay the money for your Kelsey, your Andrews, your Kittle and stuff like that. I think people are going to do what happened last year. They're going to be drafting probably Brock Bowers above him, like they drafted Kincaid above him, Laporta's going above him. So if you're one of those guys that wants to zig while everybody's zagging, look for Dalton Schultz a little bit later in the draft where everybody's already scooped up their tight ends, and I think you're going to be happy. It's going to be on a great offense that's going to score points. And then Mike Gesicki to the Bengals. Don't want to jump into too much detail, but I like it for Gesicki. Pass-catching tight end in a situation where you lose Tyler Boyd, you need another pass catcher out there. He was kind of shadowed over in New England because of the amount of wide receivers they had there, and Hunter Henry being the main tight end and the rapport already built there. Gesicki was kind of lost in that offense, and I think this brings him back out a little bit better. And I think if he can connect with Joe Burrow, he's another one that's sneaky that could end up at the end of the season with like 500, 600 yards and, like 6 touchdowns, which at the end of the day for a tight end of his caliber and where you would be picking him up in the draft is fantastic value. That's all I got for a free agent frenzy here, as I see everybody calling it. Tune in next time. Chris is going to talk about more moves that have happened from the time of this recording till next week. Don't forget to like and subscribe, hit that notification button, because we will be dropping more shorts as things happen. Chris and myself are giving our opinions as quickly as we can for you. And then if you have any comments, if you have any thoughts on any of these moves or anything in terms of our fantasy football predictions and thoughts, drop a comment down below. We're happy to get back to you. We love the back and forth banter. If you disagree with us, bring it. I want to hear it. We want to hear it. So thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.